On today's show, the Atlanta Hawks play the preseason opener on Tuesday evening. We'll preview that, talk about their latest signing, Tony Bradley, and take your mailbag questions, and all of that is coming up.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1813 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Rowland, coming to you on a Monday evening into Tuesday. And today's podcast is sponsored by the folks at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. I also want to tell you at the top of the podcast, make us your first listen each and every day here at Locked On Hawks. Check us out and subscribe to Locked On Hawks wherever you get your podcasts. We are on Apple, we're on Spotify, Amazon Music, Overcast. We're also on YouTube on the video side. Please like this episode as you are watching it, and please comment and subscribe to the podcast on that medium. We're almost there. The Atlanta Hawks play a game on Tuesday. I should tell you that I covered Media Day in full-fledged fashion last week. Did some mailbag questions, which we'll have more on today's show, actually, and did some more on the over-under series with Robbie Callan, including a look at the Pacific Division that I dropped over the weekend into Monday, talking about the teams that I think are most closely linked to the Hawks this season, and that is the Lakers and the Kings. But today we'll focus heavily on Tuesday's opener against the Pacers. But before we get to that, some actual news from Monday. So not huge headline news, but the Hawks brought in Tony Bradley, a veteran center, to an Exhibit 10 contract. I'm reporting that it's been announced that he was signed. I think I am the only one that I've seen so far report that it's an Exhibit 10 deal, but I can confirm that is the case. And if you don't know what that is, basically it's a training camp contract, a small guarantee, but not a guaranteed contract for the season. Bradley is 6'10". He is 26 years old. Spent all of last year in the G League, but before that was in the NBA for 6 seasons with the Jazz, Bulls, Thunder, and Sixers. And very notably, the first 3 years of Bradley's career were in Utah, where he was coached by Quinn Snyder. So there's some connections there. He probably is best known, for me anyway, basketball-wise, as a rebounder. He's very good at rebounding, basically. And he's kind of a fringe guy. I'm not going to act like he's a great player. He's not. But I think that he is a very, very solid Exhibit 10 contract for a guy who, again, who's a fringe NBA player, but who is an NBA-level player. He would not be out of place as a 15th man on a roster. He is, by the way, ineligible for a two-way, as a question I got today a lot. He has too much experience. Two-ways can only be on two-ways if you're in their first 4 years in the NBA, so he's not eligible for that. But if he was your 15th man, you'd be totally normal for that. Reasonable player for sure. The Hawks roster is now maxed out at 21 players. That is the number that they can be at for about 2 more weeks. Then the day before the season begins, they have to cut that down to 18, which is 15 players on the actual roster plus 3 two-ways. So right now they do have 15 players on the guaranteed roster plus 3 two-ways, and they have these 3 guys on non-guaranteed camp deals. Bradley is one, Daquan Plowden is one, and then Kevon Harris is the other. Obviously, there's a range that could happen here. Generally speaking, when a guy is signed to an Exhibit 10 contract, my default assumption, until I hear otherwise, is basically that guy's going to be cut at some point before the season. Now, that's not a guarantee to happen by any means. That could be what happens with Bradley. He could be geared toward the G League. Oftentimes, teams sign guys to Exhibit 10s, hoping that they get them to the G League in a couple of weeks. Then it could be just to have an extra body in the front court. You know, the Hawks have some injury stuff that we'll talk about later on in this episode. And Bradley is an NBA-level player who could be playing some preseason minutes, playing some practice time, et cetera, et cetera. And then also, if they were to buy out Cody Zeller, which I think is probably pretty likely at this point, it would be reasonable to sign Tony Bradley to a 1-year deal as a 15th man, 4th center depth piece if they wanted to do that. So that's a wide range. But for me, until I hear otherwise, my assumption is always going to be it's more likely than not that a guy on this kind of deal will be cut and then sent to the G League. But we will see on all of that. All right. That news out of the way, I want to give you a little bit of a what to watch for the game on Tuesday. It is the preseason opener for both teams. The Hawks will play the Pacers in that game, 7:30 Eastern time in Atlanta. It is one of the 2 home games for the Hawks in the preseason this time around. Bally Sports Southeast will have all 4 games actually this year. Occasionally there's a game where actually fans have to kind of scramble to watch it, but not this year. It's just going to be on Bally all 4 times if you are local in the Atlanta market. And I'll start here. I would encourage everyone to not overreact. Of course, that's a lost cause, and I understand that. But just for some comparisons to last year's opener for the Hawks in the preseason, no one played more than 22 or 23 minutes last year in the opener, so don't expect guys to play big minutes. For reference, Trent Forrest led the team in scoring last year in the opener. which is all you kind of need to know about the seriousness of the opener. Obviously, Trent is in my mind, an NBA level player, but not someone who's a great offensive player by any means. So that says something. Last year, the Hawks did not have DeAndre Hunter for that opener. They started Saddiq Bey at the 3 with Jalen Johnson, and they still played 16 different players in the opener of the preseason. So that's probably what I will expect. It was the same coaching staff, all that stuff. So I'm expecting guys to not play a ton, and for almost everyone that is eligible to play to probably see the court at some point on Tuesday. So injury-wise, for games in the regular season, teams have to reveal their injury reports the day before, unless it's a back-to-back. So usually, as I'm recording this podcast, like 8 p.m. Eastern on Monday, we would normally have an injury report. But in the preseason, that's not a requirement. So we don't know, and the Hawks are not going to tell us. That's just the way Quinn's going to go unless they have to submit something, and they don't. So it's a big TBD on who's going to play. The guy that I'm watching the closest is Onyeka Okongwu, because neither he nor Landry Fields would say that he was fully cleared to begin camp. To refresh your memory, he missed 26 of the last 28 games last year and then had a procedure on his toe in April that sidelined him going into the summer. I saw him in July. He was hobbling around still, et cetera, et cetera. So I shined a lot on that at Media Day because it was a very clear non-answer that he'd be actually ready to go for camp. But today, actually, on Monday, Quinn was asked about Okongwu's status by Lauren Williams of the AJC. I'm going to play Quinn's answer for you that did not exactly provide a ton of clarity. So here's Quinn on Onyeka as of today on Monday.
I know with Onyeka, he's been ramping up through training camp, and I was wondering how he's kind of shaking out as far as just getting back to maybe full health.
Yeah, I think that's just the process. And as you said, that continues as far as, being able to play a couple possessions live, being able to play multiple possessions, being able to play scrimmage, being able to play a preseason game. There's a lot that goes into that.
Yeah.
It's something we're in constant communication with the health performance group, and they're in communication with him. And our assistant coaches are obviously connected to them as far as what we're doing on the court. And just keep working at it.
So as you can hear there, that doesn't really say anything at all. So we'll see on Okongwu playing on Tuesday. If he doesn't play, I'll be intrigued to see what the messaging is around Okongwu. And I wouldn't panic if he doesn't play. Obviously, it's much more important that he plays in 2.5 weeks when the Hawks play their actual opener. But for now, that's one to keep an eye on. Also, Seth Lundy is someone who was not cleared to begin, at least they didn't say so, to begin at full go in camp. So I don't know if he's going to play either, TBD. Also, there are 4 games here, so they might just rest some guys anyway. They do play again on Thursday on the road. And if you look around the league, like teams don't like to play, not everyone, but some teams play their guys less than the full slot of sort of allotment of games. If they rested Trey, I wouldn't be surprised. If they rested the older guys, Clint, Bogey, Larry Nance, I wouldn't be surprised. So TBD. And this is not an injury, but I'll be noting definitely whether I see Cody Zeller in the building for the Hawks. I am not expecting him to be there for the record, but a game is different than practice. So if he's not there, that would definitely be another signal that he's probably not going to be coming to Atlanta at any point. I shared this over the weekend and last week, but there's no data on the team side still. I was told basically nothing's changed from Media Day. They're talking buyout from what I understand. He's not been kind of around or available to speak. So TBD on that. But if he's not in the building, that would kind of tell you another data point on that situation. Elsewhere, stuff to watch for here. I would say that on the starting lineup front, that's a question that Quinn keeps getting, and I understand why, but he's just never going to answer it. And last year, it seemed like Quinn almost relished in going out of his way to not give away his starting lineup during the exhibition run for the Hawks. They started a different lineup in all 5 games last year. They're only playing 4 this year, but all 5 were different lineups last year. They started 2 bigs in 2 of those games, which was not going to happen in the regular season. They started Bogey with Trey and DeJounte once last year. I believe they finally got to the opening night starters in the final game, but even then, we were not sure that was going to actually be the starting lineup, and Quinn wasn't going to confirm that. And if you remember, that actually was Saddiq Bey at the 4 and not Jalen Johnson, because Jalen ended up starting pretty soon after that, but the season opener, Jalen didn't start last year. So uncertainty there. I always downplay the value or importance of starting lineups compared to everybody else, but that's a question that I'm sure I will get tomorrow. I'll get on Wednesday, etc. We won't know because Quinn won't tell us. Other questions that I'm just going to throw out there now in short form that I'll be looking to kind of monitor a little bit. And I will say this not only on Tuesday, but also the entire exhibition run. I would not overreact to any of the stuff in a 1-game sample size. But for example, how does Jalen look in the half court? How are they setting him up to be aggressive as a creator on offense, especially when it's not in transition where he already excels? How are they using Larry Nance? Who is he playing with in the front court? Are they going to try Nance and Capella? I think Nance and Okongwu makes a lot of sense together, etc. Who's on the court and who is also handling the ball and initiating when Trae Young is not on the court? Because this is actually a good example of that. Trae won't play 30 minutes in this game. I'll be shocked. So you're going to have a decent sample size to see how the Hawks kind of treat those minutes without Trae. Now, it's a little bit skewed because it's going to be probably a super duper deep rotation. You might see Keaton Wallace, et cetera. But I think, how they're using Kobe, how they're using Dyson Daniels, et cetera. Also, the new guys, generally speaking, there'll be a lot of attention paid to Risacher for obvious reasons. Number 1 overall pick, first game in the NBA. What role is he in? What actions is he going to sort of utilized in offensively? Who is he guarding defensively? All of that stuff. And then Dyson Daniels, his first look in Atlanta. I personally am more interested about how they look on offense with Dyson, because defensively, I'm pretty comfortable with what he is already. But offensively, how are they using him, et cetera, et cetera. So basically, I've covered this team for more than a decade at this point in time. It's always going to be more questions than answers, probably, but there are things to monitor. And if you're wondering, I will have a podcast after the game on Tuesday. I'll be in the building for the game on Tuesday. And when I get home, I will reset, probably play some audio for you, share the thoughts from Quinn, et cetera, and my observations. So stay tuned for that. Subscribe to the podcast, et cetera. All right, we'll have more coming up on the podcast, including some key dates to monitor in the near future and your mailbag questions. But first, a word from our partners on the show. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, and basketball and football are both here now. You begin the season with a big return at FanDuel Sportsbook. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook, and now you can find a lot of information from live stats to live play-by-play and much more on the same page where you're placing your bets at FanDuel Sportsbook. You also get started with a great offer from FanDuel that is $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet at FanDuel. Also, you should know that FanDuel Sportsbook app is really easy to use. They have all the stuff that you're looking for across the sports betting space, from over-unders to point spreads, money lines, player props, game props, live betting, future bets, same-game parlays, and so much more. The app is safe and it's secure at FanDuel. They cover the entire range of sports as well. That includes the NBA, of course, WNBA, NFL, college football, baseball, hockey, golf, tennis, soccer, auto racing, boxing, MMA, and so many more sports. And now is an awesome time to sign up with the folks at FanDuel Sportsbook, and the place to go is FanDuel.com to get started. When you get there, get those $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. One more time, the place to go one more time here is visiting FanDuel.com. That's FanDuel.com, and check out America's #1 sportsbook. So mostly some mailbag questions from the rest of the podcast, but one that I've kind of gotten in bits and pieces is people asking about what dates matter, basically, in the next few weeks. For reference, the Hawks have 4 games, as I said before, in the exhibition schedule, including Tuesday. I'll note this here. There is at least a chance, and this is kind of a guess, but still an educated one, that Thursday's road opener against Miami may not happen as scheduled because there's another hurricane, unfortunately, projected to bear down on Florida in the next couple of days. Hopefully that storm is not as bad as it looks like it might be. And, of course, preseason basketball is incredibly far down the list of things that actually matter around that. But it would not surprise me at all if they just didn't go to Miami for that game. TBD, and the Hawks will be scheduled to travel down there on Wednesday. We might know more on Tuesday, but Wednesday's supposed to be kind of when it makes landfall. So if the Hawks are going to travel then, the NBA might just be like, guys, this is an exhibition game. Don't go. I'm not reporting that. That's a total guess by me, but obviously some synergy there that they're playing on Thursday, and that's a bad time to be going to Florida. So stay tuned for that. But anyway, after that, and those, again, 4 games on the schedule, is two this week and then 2 next week, 1 at home, one on the road both weeks. 2 weeks from today, as I'm recording this podcast, October 21st, is the deadline for Jalen Johnson's extension. So nothing new on that front right now. I would say, I've been saying this all summer long, that it would probably go to the last day or two. Once a deal didn't happen back in July, usually it's like deals happen in July or they happen at the very end of the process. So TBD. If you're just coming back to the podcast now for the summer, I've been saying the whole time that I've been hearing Jalen's side's going to be wanting a deal that starts with a 3, like $30+ million per season. And we'll see if that happens. That doesn't mean the Hawks are going to do that. But if they don't, it might be rolling over to next summer. There's no risk of him leaving, but an extension would be, one of those things. If the Hawks, in my opinion, always is on the team side, you want to be, if you're the team, you want to make sure you're getting some kind of concession from the player, or else there's no reason to give that deal out. With Jalen, obviously, it's going to be a high number, and it should be. The Hawks are, of course, hoping that Jalen takes a leap this year and becomes like a pretty clear max level player moving forward. Right now, he's not quite at that level yet with what he's proven, but that's a huge storyline to follow in the next 2 weeks. And we'll talk about that more when we need to. Same day, October 21st, 2 weeks from now, is the day the Hawks have to set their roster for the actual season. So that could mean they just do nothing, basically. But the opening night roster is due that day, and you have these extra guys on the roster like Tony Bradley, like Kevon Harris, like Daquan Plowden that are not currently part of the 18-man roster. They have to go from 21 to 18 in 2 weeks. So we'll see how they do that, along with Cody Zeller stuff, et cetera. There's process stuff to be handled in the next 2 weeks. The day after that is the NBA opener. By the way, again, that's 2 weeks from today, as you'll listen to this podcast on Tuesday. Only 2 games in the league that night, and the Hawks play the next day, October 23rd. And they're at home this year. Honestly, a pretty favorable matchup against the Brooklyn Nets at home, who are supposed to be pretty bad this year. Other than Washington, maybe, I would say Brooklyn is one of the easier opponents on paper, but still a game that, every game in the NBA is challenging, and that's just what it is. And then the week after that, October 30th, is the deadline to pick up rookie scale team options. The Hawks have 2 of those. One is Kobe Buffkin's 3rd-year option, and then one is David Roddy's 4th-year option after he was traded for. I expect Kobe's to be picked up. We'll talk about that more later on when we get to it. And then you got David Roddy's 4th-year option. Just to say on Kobe real quickly, just people don't always know how this stuff works. Every first-round pick is a 4-year deal, but only 2 of those are guaranteed, and that's 2 club options, and they're decided a year ahead of time. So Kobe's entering year 2 right now, but he'll be deciding on his 3rd-year option. It's like $4.5 million for the Hawks, and I think it would surprise me a lot if they didn't pick it up, but there you go. And then Roddy is still on his rookie contract. I know, obviously, it's changed a lot. A few months ago, I would have been talking about AJ Griffin here in this decision, but the Hawks do have the decision on Roddy. He's been traded multiple times, but his option is for $4.8 million or so for, again, next season. Right now, I am projecting the Hawks will not pick that up. It's not impossible that they could. They like him a little bit from what I can understand. They obviously didn't have to trade a lot to get him. It was just E.J. Liddell to get him. But there is a stigma that can attach when you decline a rookie scale option. It's a little bit different, though, when he's not the guy that you took and you just traded for. But realistically, Roddy isn't going to play a ton when everyone's healthy, I don't think. And even if he has a good season, I'm not sure that they are going to be much market for him above the minimum. So the downside risk of declining that option is not very high. The Hawks could still offer, if they decline the option, they could offer him a deal next summer that begins as high as the option, so up to $4.8 million in year 1. That is probably enough to sign him, barring a breakout that I'm not seeing coming. So if I had to guess right now, I'm picking up Buffkin pretty clearly, and I would probably decline Roddy's, but we will see, and maybe Roddy will be showing more that we've seen before. Maybe the Hawks like him a lot. TBD on that. So that's still 3 weeks away, but an overview for now about what's going on the situation. So it's kind of fast and furious now. Once media day happens, you got kind of a lull with training camp where they're practicing a lot, basically twice a day last week, but then it's kind of out of the public eye other than like quotes and things like that. But after that, it's fast forward now. Like once the Hawks start playing games, you get more public stuff. There's open practice for the fans in Atlanta on Sunday, this coming Sunday afternoon. So like there's 4 or 5 times you see guys in public, and there's decisions to be made, roster stuff, much more active than it is in the offseason. So stay tuned for all of that. We'll have it broken down each and every day on the podcast. All right, one more word from our partners, so we'll come back with more from the mailbag. Today's show is brought to you by Game Time. And Game Time is the best place to find tickets. There's nothing like checking out a live event, whether it is music or theater or comedy or, of course, sports. They have a new feature at Game Time called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets even easier for you. They can take out all the stuff that you don't need and only show you the incredible deals that you actually do want on great seats. So no wasting time searching through thousands of different tickets that you actually don't have any interest in. For example, there are awesome deals right now for the Hawks season opener at home, October 23rd against Brooklyn, including a pair of tickets right now for $24 each, including fees at Game Time. That's an awesome deal, of course. There's more of that happening all the time at Game Time. My personal favorite thing about Game Time is that you can actually turn on a feature to view the seats through all-in pricing. So there are no surprise fees if you have that feature turned on at the end of the checkout process. Also get a view from your seats in a panoramic fashion in the app before you actually buy them, so you know exactly what you're going to be getting into when you get into that venue. Plus, you're getting the lowest possible price with Game Time. Take all the guesswork out of buying tickets with the Game Time app. Download the Game Time app right now, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create that account at Game Time and redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Download the Game Time app today. What time is it? It's Game Time. All right, a mailbag question related to what I talked about a little bit earlier on the show with Tony Bradley and all these things. It comes from Nick. Can you take your best shot at filling out the 96 minutes at the 4 and the 5 on the Hawks right now? I haven't seen anyone really explain what happens when Jalen is on the bench with the current roster. So I'm going to intentionally be brief on this because it's going to come up a lot in the next 2 weeks, basically, with the entire rotation. But because it was logically before Tuesday's game, you got the Bradley news. I'm going to be just tackling this shortly. So obviously there are, like he said in the question, 96 minutes. That's 48 per at the 4 and the 5. You have to fill kind of logically. I think you have to start with this. Jalen probably in that 34-ish minute range. Last year, that's what he averaged. Trey led the team with 36 minutes, so maybe it's 36, but it won't be more than that. I wouldn't guess on a daily basis. So I'll use 34 for Jalen. Then I am still thinking that if everybody's healthy, and the question is basically if everybody's healthy. If everyone's healthy, I project Clint Capella and Onyeka Okongwu to combine for 48 minutes. So basically, in a competitive game where everyone's healthy, I expect, not demand or like guarantee, but expect that for every competitive minute, either Clint or Onyeka will be on the court for the most part. Will they throw a curveball sometimes and go with Nance or Jalen at center or something crazy? Maybe, but on a daily basis, what I would go with. So if you add that in, that gets you to 82 minutes. Just for the record, last year it was a 26-22 kind of split with Clint and Onyeka when they both were available. If either one of those guys missed time, the other one plays more. Now, a little bit less this year with Larry Nance because he's better than Bruno Fernando was, but still. And yes, there's a chance that Nance plays some center, but I think for right now, pencil in 48 combined for Clint and Onyeka. That's 82 minutes. That means there's 14 left. And basically, there are two candidates for the minutes, again, when everyone is healthy, which is not a scenario that I always say this, but it's true. Most times in the NBA, somebody's hurt. It is what it is. But let's say opening night, no injuries, 14 minutes left in this projection. It's either DeAndre Hunter and or Larry Nance, I think. Nance is too good for the role, but it goes to the logic they kind of have. I think he's better at the 5 still. He can play the 4 a little bit. Even if he probably shouldn't play with Clint, there is some Nance and Okongwu minutes that might be interesting to deploy. Then Hunter obviously can play there. He's not great there rebounding-wise. I think him and Okongwu is too small. But in general, maybe you could say Hunter and Clint and Nance and Okongwu. That's a rough estimate. Again, intentionally brief. And I'm not saying that nobody else can play. Injuries will come into play. The Hawks might want to see David Roddy. The Hawks might want to see Mo Gay. The Hawks might want to see, player X, Don Barlow occasionally. I think he's kind of a combo big, but still, they have other guys that could play minutes at the 4. That is possible. You could see Tony Bradley if things go weird. But for now, fully healthy, I think it is a combination of basically 4 players. Sorry, 5 players. Jalen, Clint, Onyeka, Larry Nance, and DeAndre Hunter. And anything else, if everybody is full, would be out there, I don't think. There you go. Okay, question from Humpty Dumpty before we get out of here. Shouts to the questioner and the name there. Does it make sense to draft a player with the Kings pick, or should the Hawks just trade the pick due to their roster crunch? So for some context here, the question came in as a response to the podcast I did with Greg Wissinger back earlier in, I believe it was in September, when I talked about the Kings extensively through the pick, basically the lens of the pick the Hawks might get from them this coming season. And then on the most recent show on Sunday into Monday, that I talked about that again with Robbie Calland. And as of now, I think the Hawks are more likely than not going to get the Kings pick somewhere in that middle of the first round range. That'd be a really good outcome for the Hawks. But it's way too early to give a definitive answer to the question. I think that the roster crunch, by the way, as a sidebar for the future is really overblown right now. The Hawks have a roster situation that's interesting at the moment, but part of the reason I want to answer this question is that the roster crunch, quote unquote, for the future is not really a thing that exists right now. Like right now, they have an overflowing roster for this season, but they have some decisions to make. But they could still use some extra depth for the future. Like, for example, Capella and Nance and Garrison Matthews are all on expiring contracts. David Roddy has that team option that we talked about earlier that they might decline. That's 4 guys right there. Like they're already kind of not married to DeAndre Hunter. If they could trade him, that'd be a 5th guy. They have some minimums. Like they're not like overflowing like maybe the Rockets are with like guys where they just have so many different guys. They don't really have that problem yet. So some of this is theoretical, but like some of this might be answered by what the Lakers pick ends up being, because I do think that you don't want to like ignore anything here, and the draft's supposed to be pretty good this year, at least right now. You want to have bites at the apple. I think if the Hawks were to make a buy trade during this season, to the question's point, they're more likely to use the Kings pick to do that than they are the Lakers pick. The Lakers pick has upside. The Kings pick does not have. Now, I'm not saying it's going to come to fruition, but the Lakers pick has top 1 upside. By definition, it is unprotected. So you have to get very lucky about that to happen. But the Kings pick can't be higher than 13th this year. And you don't want to just give it away willy-nilly. that could be the 13th pick of the draft this year. And if it's a late lottery pick in a good draft, that has real value. So you don't want to just throw it in for no reason. But the Hawks are famously kind of not totally void of picks, but they're shorthanded on picks in the future for a few years because they don't have their own picks. So if you want to go out and try to buy a player, and when I say buy, I mean like proactively add a player that you're giving up assets for, it's a logical way to do that along with young pieces. So I think it's tradable. The pick is tradable. It kind of always has been as a sweetener. If the Hawks want to make a deal in season, sure, maybe even at the draft. If the Lakers pick ends up being a good one and they have 2 picks in the top 15, you could see them trade one or both of those picks. Wouldn't stun me. But in the meantime, I kind of always project a pick to not be traded before it comes up until it is. Like sometimes different situations, but if I had to guess right now, A, I think the Hawks will probably get the pick, and B, they probably won't trade it this year because they're not in that like buy mode right now in season, but maybe they win a bunch of games and they want to go for it. I get all that too. So it's a big TBD, to be honest, but it's an interesting factor because it's like, all right, what's this Kings pick? And I'm sure there's a little bit of not exhaustion, but like people are just aware of it now. It's been in the consciousness for a long time. The pick came in the Kevin Huerter trade, which happened, 2+ years ago. So it's been the Kings pick is kind of in the lexicon right now for the Hawks. Like, all right, when's this pick? When is it ever going to come? And by the way, there's another chance this year it could roll over again. We could do a whole nother year of this. So stay tuned. But in the meantime, I would say it's most likely going to be, at least more likely than not, going to be a pick that they probably just use whenever they get it to draft someone. But TBD, and one more time on the roster crunch, they don't really have a roster crunch future facing. Present day, yeah, they're pretty full. But in the future, like they have their core players for sure, but not every core player works out. I mean, not every young guy works out. Not every draft pick works out. Like that's just part of the churn of the NBA. Go back a few years and like Cam Reddish is a good example. AJ Griffin's a good example. Like picks just you miss sometimes. Sometimes you hit, sometimes you miss, and come and go as you please. All right, that's all I have on today's show. One more time, I'll have an episode as I basically do all year long. So if you're new to the podcast, we almost always, I mean, with very, very, very few exceptions, have a reaction podcast after every game. It would have to be a serious scenario for me not to have a podcast. Generally speaking, if it's totally unavoidable, but I might miss one a year, and even that might be high. So we have the podcast on Tuesday. Stay tuned for that. Please subscribe to the podcast wherever you find your podcasts. We're on Apple, we're on Spotify, we're on Amazon Music and Overcast. We are on YouTube. Please like and subscribe to the show on that platform. And I get questions about this all the time, probably because I'm doing a decent job of plugging the show. But the best thing you can possibly do to support the podcast is to do a combination of these things. A, support our sponsors. B, subscribe on YouTube and the audio side to give us the download on the audio side and the /subscription/watch on the YouTube side. That's all very valuable for me to help grow the podcast. And also, number 3 is to tell your friends about the show. So please go ahead and spread the word. It's a good time to kind of jump on board right now. The season's now starting. I understand people don't always want to jump in the offseason. I get that. It's kind of a dead zone unless you're a total sicko like I am. But now that we're here, there'll be games played. Spread the word. Post it on social media. Text it to your friends or whatever. I really appreciate the support on the podcast. All right, everybody. Thanks for being here. We'll see you after the game on Tuesday. And enjoy the rest of your week. We'll see you next time.